Hi. This story is called Hansel and Gretel. Near a great forest there lived a poor woodcutter and his wife and his 2 children. The boy's name was Hansel and the girl's Gretel. They had very little to eat, and once, when there was great famine in the land, the man could not even gain their daily bread. As he lay in bed one night, thinking of this, and turning and tossing, he sighed heavily and said to his wife, "What will become of us? We cannot even feed our children. There's nothing left for ourselves." "I will tell you what, husband," answered the wife. "We will take the children early in the morning into the forest where it is thickest. We will make them a fire, and we will give each of them a piece of bread. Then we will go to our work and leave them alone. They will never find their way home again, and we shall be rid of them." "No, wife," said the man, "I cannot do that. I cannot find it in my heart to take my children into the forest and leave them there alone. The wild animals would soon come and eat them up." "Oh, you fool," said she, "then we will all 4 starve. You had better plane the boards for our coffins now." And she left him no peace until he at last consented. "But I really pity the poor children," said the man. The 2 children, who had not been able to sleep for hunger, had heard what their stepmother had said to their father. Gretel wept bitterly and said to Hansel, "It is all over with us." "Do be quiet, Gretel," said Hansel. "Do not fret. I will think of something." And when the parents had gone to sleep, he got up, put on his little coat, opened the back door, and slipped outside. The moon was shining brightly, and the white flints that lay in front of the house glistened like pieces of silver. Hansel stooped and filled his little pockets of his coat as full as it could hold. Then he went back again and said to Gretel, "Be easy, dear little sister, and go to sleep quietly. God will not forsake us," and laid himself down again in his bed. When the day was breaking, and before the sun had risen, the wife came and awakened the 2 children, saying, "Get up, you lazy bones! We're going into the forest to cut wood." Then she gave each of them a piece of bread and said, "That is for your dinner. You must not eat it before then, for you will get no more." Gretel carried the bread under her apron, for Hansel had his pockets full of the stones. Then they set off together on their way to the forest. When they had gone a little way, Hansel stood still and looked back toward the house, and this he did again and again, till his father said to him, "Hansel, what are you looking at? Take care not to forget your legs." "Oh, father," said Hansel, "I'm looking at my little white kitten, who is sitting up on the roof to bid me good-bye." "You young fool," said the woman, "that is not your kitten, but the sunshine on the chimney-pot." Of course, Hansel had not been looking at his kitten, but had been taking every now and then a little flint from his pocket and dropping it on the road. When they had reached the middle of the forest, the father told the children to collect wood and make a fire to keep them warm, and Hansel and Gretel gathered brushwood enough for a little mountain, and it was set on fire, and when the flame was burning quite high, the wife said, "Now lie down by the fire and rest yourselves, you children, and we will go and cut wood, and when we are ready we will come to fetch you." So Hansel and Gretel sat by the fire, and at noon they ate their pieces of bread. They thought their father was in the wood all the time, as they seemed to hear the strokes of the axe, but really it was only a dry branch hanging to a withered tree that the wind moved to and fro. So when they had stayed there a long time, their eyelids closed with weariness, and they fell fast asleep. When at last they woke, it was night, and Gretel began to cry and said, "How shall we ever get out of this wood?" But Hansel comforted her, saying, "Wait a little while longer until the moon rises, and then we can easily find the way home." And when the full moon got up, Hansel took his little sister by the hand and followed the way where the flint stones shone like silver on the ground and showed them the road. Well, they walked on the whole night through, and at the break of day they came to their father's house. They knocked at the door, and when the wife opened it and saw it was Hansel and Gretel, she said, "You naughty children, why did you sleep so long in the wood? We thought you were never coming home again." But the father was glad, for it had gone to his heart to leave them both in the woods alone. Not very long after, there was again great scarcity in the land, and the children heard their mother say at night in bed to their father, "Everything is gone. We have only half a loaf of bread, and after that the tale comes to an end. The children must be gone. We will take them farther into the wood this time, so that they shall never find their way back again. There is no other way." The man felt sad at heart, and he thought, "It would be better to share our last bite of bread with one's children." But the wife would listen to nothing he said, but scolded and reproached him. He who says A must say B too, and when a man has given in once, he has to do it a second time. But the children were not asleep, and they heard the talk. When the parents had gone to sleep, Hansel got up to go out and get more flint stones, as he did before. But the wife had locked the door, and Hansel could not get out. But he comforted his little sister and said, "Don't cry, Gretel, and go to sleep quietly. God will help us." Early the next morning, the wife came and pulled the children out of bed. She gave each of them a little piece of bread, less than before, and on the way to the wood Hansel crumbled the bread in his pocket, and often stopped to throw a crumb on the ground. "Hansel, what are you staring behind you for?" said the father. "I'm looking at my little pigeon sitting on the roof to say good-bye to him," answered Hansel. "You fool," said the wife, "that is no pigeon, but the morning sun shining on the chimney-pot." Hansel went on as before and strewed breadcrumbs all along the road. The woman led the children far into the wood, where they had never been before in all their lives, and again there was a large fire made, and the mother said, "Sit still there, you children, and when you are tired you can go to sleep. We are going into the forest to cut wood, and in the evening, when we are ready to go home, we will come and fetch you." So when noon came, Gretel shared her bread with Hansel, who had strewed his along the road. Then they went to sleep, and the evening passed, and no one came for the poor children. When they awoke, it was dark night, and Hansel comforted his little sister and said, "Wait a little, Gretel, until the moon gets high, and we shall be able to see the way home by the crumbs of bread that I have scattered along." So when the moon rose, they got up, but they could find no crumbs of bread, for the birds of the woods and of the fields had come and picked them up. Hansel thought they might find the way all the same, but they could not. They went on all that night and the next day from morning till evening, but they could not find the way out of the wood, and they were very hungry, for they had nothing to eat but a few berries they could pick up. And when they were so tired they could no longer drag themselves along, they lay down under a tree and fell asleep. It was now the third morning since they had left their father's house. They were always trying to get back to it, but instead of that they only found themselves farther into the wood, and if help had not come soon, they would have starved. But about noon they saw a pretty snow-white bird sitting on a bough and singing sweetly, and they stopped to listen. And when they had finished, the bird spread his wings and flew before them, and they followed him until they came to a little house, and the bird perched on the roof. And when they came nearer, they saw that the house was built of bread, and its roof was cakes, and the windows were made of transparent sugar. "We will have some of this," said Hansel, "and make a fine meal. I will eat a piece of the roof. Gretel, you can have some of the window. That will taste sweet." So Hansel reached up and broke off a bit of the roof, just to see how it tasted, and Gretel stood by the window and chewed on it. Then they heard a thin voice call out from inside, "Nibble, nibble like a mouse, who is nibbling at my house?" And the children answered, "Never mind, it is the wind." And they went on eating, never bothering themselves. Hansel, who found that the roof tasted very nice, took down a great piece of it, and Gretel pulled out a large round window pane, and sat her down and began to eat it. Then the door opened, and an old woman came out, leaning upon a cane. Hansel and Gretel felt very frightened, and they dropped what they had in their hands. The old woman, however, nodded her head and said, "Ah, my dear children, how came you here? You must come indoors and stay with me. It will be no trouble." So she took of each of them by the hand and led them into her little house. And then they found a good meal laid out of milk and pancakes, with sugar and apple and nuts. After that she showed them 2 little white beds, and Hansel and Gretel laid themselves down on the bed and thought they were in heaven. The old woman, although her behavior was kind, was in reality a wicked witch who lay in wait for children, and she had built the little house with the purpose of enticing them. When they were once inside, she would kill them and cook them and eat them, and then it was a great feast day for her. The witch's eyes were little and red, and she could not see very far, but she had a very keen sense of smell like the beasts of the forest, and knew very well when human creatures were near. When she knew that Hansel and Gretel were coming, she gave a spiteful laugh and said triumphantly, "I have them, and they shall not escape me." Early in the morning, before the children were awake, she got up to look at them as they lay sleeping so peacefully with their round, rosy cheeks, and said to herself, "What a fine meal I shall have." Then she grasped Hansel with her withered hand and led him into a little stable and shut him up behind a grating. And call and scream as he might, it was no good. Then she went back to Gretel and shook her, crying, "Get up, lazy bones! Fetch water and cook something nice for your brother. He is outside in the stable and must be fattened up. And when he is fat enough, I will eat him." Gretel began to weep bitterly, but it was of no use. She had to do what the wicked witch bade her. And so the best of victuals was cooked for poor Hansel, while Gretel got nothing but crab shells to eat. Each morning the old woman visited the little stable and cried, "Hansel, stretch out your finger, that I may tell if you are fat enough yet." Hansel, however, used to hold out a little bone, and the old woman, who had weak eyes, could not see what it was, and supposing it to be Hansel's finger, wondered very much that he was not getting fatter. When 4 weeks had passed, Hansel seemed to remain so thin she lost patience and could wait no longer. "Now then, Gretel," cried she to the little girl, "be quick and draw water. Be Hansel fat or be he thin, tomorrow I will kill and cook him." Oh, what a grief for poor little sister to have to fetch water, and how the tears flowed down her cheeks. "Dear God, pray help us," she cried. "If we had been devoured by wild beasts in the wood, at least we would have died together." "Spare me your lamentations," said the old woman. "They are of no avail." Early next morning, Gretel had to get up, make the fire, and fill the kettle. "First we will do the baking," said the old woman. "I have heated the oven already and kneaded the dough." She pushed poor Gretel toward the oven, out of which the flames were already shining. "Creep in," said the witch, "and see if it is properly hot, so that the bread may be baked." And Gretel, once in, she meant to shut the door upon her and let her be baked, and then she would have eaten her. But Gretel guessed her intention and said, "I don't know how to do it. How shall I get in?" "Stupid goose," said the old woman. "The opening is big enough, do you see? I could get in myself." And she stooped down and put her head in the oven's mouth. Then Gretel gave her a push so that she went in farther, and she shut the iron door upon her and put down the bar. Oh, how frightfully the old woman howled, but Gretel ran away and left the wicked witch to burn miserably. Gretel went straight to Hansel and opened the stable door and cried, "Hansel, we are free! The old witch is dead!" Then out flew Hansel like a bird from its cage as soon as the door is opened. How they rejoiced! How they fell upon each other's necks and danced about and kissed each other. And as they had nothing more to fear, they went all over the witch's house, and in every corner there stood chests of pearls and precious stones. "This is something better than flint stones," said Hansel, as he filled his pockets, and Gretel, thinking she also would like to carry something home, filled her apron full. "Now away we go," said Hansel, "and we can only get out, if only we can get out of the witch's wood." When they had journeyed a few hours, they came to a great piece of water. "We can never get across this," said Hansel. "I see no stepping stones and no bridge." "And there is no boat either," said Gretel. "But here comes a white duck. If I ask her, she'll help us over." So she cried, "Duck, duck, here we stand, Hansel and Gretel on the land. Stepping stones and bridge we lack. Carry us over on your nice white back." And the duck came accordingly, and Hansel got upon her and told his sister to come too. "No," answered Gretel, "that would be too hard upon the duck. We can go separately, one after the other." And that is how it was managed. And after that they went on happily until they came to the wood, and the way grew more and more familiar, till at last they saw in the distance their father's house. Then they ran till they came to it, rushed in at the door, and fell upon their father's neck. The man had not had a happy moment since he had left his children in the wood, but his wife had died. And when Gretel opened her apron, and the pearls and precious stones were scattered all over the room, and Hansel took one handful after another out of his pocket, then all care was at an end, and they lived in great joy together. Sing, everyone, my story is done, and look round the house, there runs a little mouse. He that can catch her before she scampers in may make himself a very large fur cap out of her skin.